Hey guys, tonight we begin with something darker than usual, literally. You wake up one morning in the early medieval world, and for some reason the sun forgot to clock in. No golden rays, no cheery warmth, no cheerful birdsong bouncing off village rooftops, just thick, unmoving gray above you like someone smeared wet ash across the sky and called it a Tuesday. Spoiler alert, it doesn't get better tomorrow, or the day after, or the year after. You are about to live through what many historians now call the worst time to be alive, specifically the year 536 AD. The sun disappears for nearly 18 months. Crops fail. People starve. Empires tremble. And you have to figure out how to survive breakfast. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You blink awake, not because sunlight tickles your eyelids, but because your breath fogs up in front of your face. In June, the inside of your hut smells like damp wool smoke and existential dread. You squint toward what should be the door. It's open, but there's no light beyond it. Not even the weak kind that usually limps through early morning mist. This is thicker, darker, and somehow quieter. The birds aren't singing. The goats aren't yelling. Even the flies seem confused. You're not dreaming. This is the morning. Kind of. Your family stirs beside you in the one-room house. Blankets, if you're lucky enough to own more than one, are clutched tightly. Everyone has that same look in their eyes, a mix of hunger chill and the growing suspicion that the gods have left the building. Outside the village is moving slowly. People walk around with torches, even though it's well past sunrise. The flames flicker unnaturally against the low-hanging cloud. You see old Martin the baker shaking his head, muttering something about eclipses and demons. He hasn't made bread in 3 days. There's nothing to bake with. Your neighbor, Gertrude, clutches her baby wrapped in 4 layers of sackcloth. Must be a sign, she whispers to no one in particular. God's cleaning house. A few others nod. Someone crosses themselves, then adds a second cross just to be safe. The air smells like burnt pine mixed with rotting leaves, as if the forest tried to cough. It's hard to breathe. Your chest feels tight. And it's cold. So cold, the chickens refuse to leave their coop, and your cousin swears the pond tried to freeze last night. In summer, you go to the edge of the village and look out across the valley. Or you try to. The fog hangs there like a blanket someone nailed to the sky. It isn't mist. It isn't rain. It's ash. No one told you, because no one knows it yet. But half a world away, a volcano just exploded like it had something to prove. Scholars today still debate which one it was. Some point to Iceland. Others suggest Ilopango in El Salvador. One even swears it was a double eruption volcanic teamwork, if you will. Either way, the result is the same. You are now living in a giant smoke cloud. Of course you don't know that. You just know your lungs hurt and your cabbages died. Again. By noon, people stop pretending. They light fires in broad daylight just to see what they're doing. A few monks write things down. Their notes survive. The sun gave no light like the moon. Or a failure of the sun. You'd say the same thing if you knew how to write. Instead, you just grunt and rub your arms, swearing your own skin feels thinner lately. Your stomach growls. That's not new. Food was already scarce before this sky sneeze started, but now, with no sunlight, Your garden's gone from sad to funeral. The root vegetables aren't rooting. The grain isn't graining. You're pretty sure your potatoes just gave up and became decorative. The wheat crop. It's sprouting fungus faster than it grows. Even the goats are looking at you like you're next on the menu. Some villagers try praying. Others try shouting at the sky. One very enthusiastic man named Alric paints himself blue and demands that Odin fix the weather. Nobody stops him. Honestly, it's the most entertainment you've had all week. You can't measure time properly anymore. The days blur together. The cold doesn't leave. You go to bed in what feels like twilight and wake up in the same dim confusion. Some call it a punishment from heaven. Others blame a solar eclipse. A few mutter about sorcery witches or the devil himself. No one has an answer, but everyone has a theory, and all of them end with, "We're probably going to die." And you just might. You've already heard whispers about famine 3 villages over. A traveling merchant stopped by last week. He didn't want to trade. He just wanted to know if anyone had seen the sun lately. You told him no. He nodded like that confirmed something terrible and left without a word. His horse looked haunted. You're not sure what that means, but it's not encouraging. What no one knows, yet what you definitely don't, is that this year, 536 AD, will be remembered as the beginning of the worst climate catastrophe in recorded human history. For the next 18 months, the sun will remain dim. Temperatures will plummet. Crops will fail. And millions, yes, millions, will die across the known world. All because some mountain somewhere had a temper tantrum. You're living it, and you don't even get a chapter in the history books. Just a single footnote. Unusually cold summer observed in Gaul. That's you. You're the unusual, and yet somehow you keep moving. You take the water bucket to the river. It's half frozen and smells like moss and failure. You pretend it's refreshing. You check the animal pen. One of the pigs is missing. You suspect it walked off into the fog just to escape this storyline. Even the town priest seems nervous. He lights candles at midday and chants louder than usual. You ask him when the sun will return. He says soon. You don't believe him. Neither does he. That night, you huddle by the fire. You think about how the world used to feel warm, how sunlight used to mean something. Your mother hums a tune she says her mother sang during hard winters. You're not sure if it's meant to comfort you or distract you from the fact that dinner is 3 turnip skins and a spoon of lard. The fire crackles. Someone farts. Life goes on. And the sky still gray, still low, still waiting to crush the next little dream that dares to poke its head out of the cold, crumbling earth. You don't remember the last time you saw your shadow. It's not that you're especially nostalgic about it. You've never written a poem or ode to your shadow before. But now that it's gone, its absence feels strangely personal. Like the sky took something of yours and forgot to return it. Morning comes, allegedly, but the world never turns gold. Instead, it hovers in a kind of eternal dusk, a pale, sickly twilight that bleeds into every hour of the day. People have started measuring time by stomach rumblings, or how many times the dog sighs before noon. You wake up, eat something vaguely edible, squint at the gray horizon, and say, well, must be mid-morning-ish. And here's the real kicker. The sun is technically rising. Somewhere behind that thick veil of volcanic ash, it's going about its usual business. But you wouldn't know. Even when it climbs to its highest point, it gives off no warmth, no brilliance, no comfort. Just a dim, dirty smear in the sky that might as well be the moon after a bad day. The older folks in the village say it's never been like this, not even during hard winters, not even when the river froze solid and people skated on it with roof tiles tied to their feet. This is different, unnatural, endless. You start noticing strange things. Candles burn faster, like they're racing to reach some finish line you can't see. Moss grows on both sides of the trees now. Birds migrate, then circle back like they forgot why they left. Time once, a steady drumbeat of sunrise and sunset, now feels like soup, thick, slow, and impossible to separate into proper portions. At first, people try to keep up appearances. Shops open. Children play bakers, light their ovens. But the illusion crumbles quickly. The crops aren't growing. The sheep barely graze. Everyone walks around like they're on a stage set where someone forgot to plug in the sun. And then the hunger sets in. You notice it first in the little things. The bread gets thinner. Porridge gets more porridgey, less anything else. Salt disappears from tables. Someone suggests roasting acorns. Someone else tries boiling their shoe. One man claims he remembers a stew made from nettles and optimism. He doesn't laugh when he says it. The village elders meet in secret as if there's anything left to plan. They don't come up with solutions. They just keep saying the same phrase over and over. We just need the light to return. But the light doesn't return. One morning, or what you assume is morning, you pass by a small boy with soot on his face standing in the road and staring straight up at the sky. "What's he looking at?" someone asks. "Waiting for the sun," says his sister. He thinks if he sees it first, he'll get a wish. You don't have the heart to tell him the sun owes no one wishes anymore. Elsewhere in the world, this phenomenon is being recorded in quiet panic. In Ireland, scribes note a failure of bread. In China, court historians mention frost in midsummer. In Constantinople, monks whisper of a curse spreading across the earth. And in your tiny village, you just try to keep your feet dry and your fire lit. People start naming the days after things they miss. Warm day, light day, the long ago day. It's easier than pretending the calendar still matters. The animals are no better. Cows stop producing milk. Chickens lay nothing but disappointed clucks. Even the barn cats look unnerved, like they know something and just won't tell. At night, wolves howl longer, not louder, just longer, like they're trying to stretch the sound across whatever light is missing. One afternoon, a man from the next village arrives. He's wrapped in too many layers, his beard frosted with breath. He claims their priest declared it the end of days. He also mentions that someone tried to sacrifice a pig to make the sun come back. It didn't work. The pig, for its part, was deeply unimpressed. Your own priest tries to stay upbeat. He gives sermons about patience and faith. But even he started slipping phrases like mysterious trial and cosmic rebuke into his speeches. You catch him one evening, just staring at the horizon, whispering something that sounds suspiciously like, "Where did it go?" Then one day, you look up and see brightness, real brightness, not warmth, not actual sunshine, but a subtle, almost imperceptible thinning of the gloom. You stare wide-eyed, breath held heart-pounding. And then it fades again. Just like that. Hope appears, teases you, and vanishes back into the ash cloud. Someone cries. No one mocks them. The hunger deepens. You're down to root vegetables and melted snow. The last of the salted meat was eaten 2 weeks ago. A goat went missing yesterday. You suspect it was not an accident. And suddenly every fire smells just a little too rich. This is where the rumors start. One family hasn't been seen in days. Someone says they moved. Someone else says they were seen boiling something suspicious. A third person mumbles, "Better not ask." You decide you don't want to know. In the evenings, people gather closer to the hearth, not just for warmth, but to share news. Real news. Not gossip, not stories, just clues. Did someone see green shoots? Did anyone hear birdsong? Did someone dream of sunlight? It becomes a kind of ritual. You share your visions of light like bedtime stories. I remember what summer smelled like. I dreamed of apples ripening. I swear my shadow twitched. Some nights that's all you have. Shared hallucinations of a time when morning meant something and noon wasn't a theory. And through it all, the sky remains the same pale gray, endless. You start marking the days on the wall, not with numbers, just lines. The tally of not light, the calendar of waiting. You tell yourself this can't last forever. Even volcanoes get tired. Even curses expire. But in the dark, with no seasons, no sun, and barely enough food to justify a spoon, it's hard to keep the faith. Some part of you begins to believe that this is the new normal, that the sun has simply left. And you're just one cold, hungry, soot-covered figure in a world that forgot how to dawn. Food becomes a memory before it becomes a crisis. You think about bread a lot these days. Not the kind with crusty edges and warm steam. Not the kind that fills a house with the smell of comfort and time. No, your mind reaches back to the bread you used to complain about. Hard rye with too much husk. Soggy barley loaves from market stalls. The sad dry corner crust you'd feed to the chickens. You'd trade a boot for it now. It's not just you. Everyone's kitchen has turned into a museum of hunger. Empty sacks, bins of spoiled turnips, jars of whatever used to live in jars. You scrape the inside of a pot with your fingernail and lick the bitter taste, wondering whether it's porridge residue or mold. And frankly, you don't care. The famine doesn't arrive with a trumpet. It tiptoes in quietly while everyone's still pretending. First the chickens stop laying, then the goats go dry. Then the children stop asking for seconds because they've learned there won't be any. And then comes the bread problem. No sun means no grain. No grain means no flour. No flour means no bread. But more than that, it means no routine. No baking day. No smell of yeast. No chewing your way through a loaf while someone tells a half-funny story. It means you start eating things that technically fall under the category not lethal. You try pine bark. It tastes like regret. You grind acorns and mix them with moss. It's bitter chalky and probably hallucinogenic. You mix hay into porridge. It doesn't digest well. Someone suggests boiling leather. It's not a joke. You remember hearing about famine bread, once a mythical meal of roots and weeds smashed into a kind of paste dried near a fire and eaten with a forced smile. That memory becomes your recipe book. Every village has its own version. In yours, someone tries to use ground-up reeds. The result is green sponge-like and causes immediate regret. The town elder gnaws on it thoughtfully, then says, "Could be worse." You're not sure how, but you nod. Over time, cooking becomes alchemy. You mix sawdust into oat paste. You toast onion skins. You boil stones seriously. They make the water taste like minerals. And if you squint hard enough and pretend you're royalty, it sort of feels like soup. There are debates over what counts as edible. A tree root depends how soft it is. A mushroom depends how confident you feel. A fish that smells like sulfur depends how long it's been since your last meal. Everything becomes a negotiation. Your teeth hurt. Constant chewing of rough, unground grain and bark mash does that. Your belly aches not from fullness, but from betrayal. Your body keeps expecting nutrition and getting texture instead. And still, every day, someone tries to make bread. They kneel near the fire mix, whatever they have, and try to shape it into something that looks like a loaf. The result is usually gray, crumbly, and suspiciously light, as though it's made of haunted dust. You bite into one, and it dissolves into a mouthful of despair and grit. One day, someone brings a loaf that's actually round and holds its shape. It even smells like something. Everyone gathers. There's a moment of hope, of reverence. Then someone cuts it open and finds it's hollow. Just air and soot. You laugh. You all laugh. And then someone cries. You begin dreaming of bread. Not metaphorically. Literal dreams. You see fields of wheat. You smell fresh loaves. You wake up chewing your blanket and whispering just one more bite. A man from the next village claims he saw a golden loaf in the sky. He hasn't eaten in 2 days, so everyone nods supportively. Then someone finds mold. It's growing on old stored grain. You know you shouldn't eat it. You know it's dangerous. But the debate begins. How bad is dangerous? One woman says she used to scrape mold off cheese. Another says she once ate a spoiled apple and only had mild hallucinations. A third says, maybe if we boil it, you try boiling it. It doesn't help. Later that night, 4 people vomit and 2 faint. But no one dies. And weirdly, that's considered a success. You hear rumors of traveling healers promising hunger cures. Boil mint leaves, one says. Chew birch bark, says another. Someone claims there's a man with a pouch of flour who will trade it for your boots, your cloak, or your dignity. You consider it. Then realize you already traded your dignity for boiled hay yesterday. The desperation leads to new professions. A man becomes bread finder. He walks from town to town, sniffing out rumors of grain. People treat him like a prophet. His bag contains roots pebbles and a small lump of salt he guards like treasure. He trades 1 pinch for an hour by someone's fire. You watch him sleep like a king. Another woman becomes a crumb collector. She offers to sweep houses in exchange for whatever she finds. She has a small pouch. She never speaks. You once saw her eat what might have been lint. And then one afternoon, someone steals a loaf. Not a real one. A ceremonial one, an old dry piece of hard bread used in a religious ritual. Someone broke into the church and took it. There's outrage, accusations, moral speeches. But underneath it all, you can see it jealousy, because at least someone had bread, even if it tasted like dust and penance. Days blur into weeks. You forget what full feels like. You learn that hunger has stages. First it gnaws, then it whispers. Then it settles in your bones, like a bad tenant who refuses to leave. You stop feeling sharp. Everything is foggy. Movement feels underwater. But the worst is when you almost get food. The moment when someone opens a sack and finds weevils. Or when a root rots before you can boil it. Or when someone offers you a crust, then remembers their child hasn't eaten either. Those are the moments that carve deep. And yet, people adapt. You see 2 kids sharing a roasted beetle. They laugh. You pass a hut and hear singing, weak, tuneless, but cheerful. Someone draws a picture of bread in the dirt and labels it someday. The human spirit, for all its flaws, has a dark sense of humor. And so you endure. You chew bitter roots. You drink cloudy broth. You shape paste into discs and call it bread. You know it's not. But pretending helps. just enough to survive another day without sunrise. You start writing things down, not because you're a poet, not because you think someone centuries from now will pore over your words in a candlelit study and sigh. How tragic. No, you write because talking takes energy, and energy is something you mostly remember from the past. Words on a wall or scrap of parchment are easier, cheaper, quieter. You scratch symbols with charcoal near the hearth. One line for each day the sun didn't show up. One smudge every time someone trades a spoonful of soup for silence. You draw a loaf of bread with little wings on it and label it extinct. Others are doing it too. The monk in the hilltop chapel is keeping a journal. He used to write sermons. Now, he just records temperatures, crop failures, and whose goat died today. The scribe in the next town is writing letters that won't be delivered. He just folds them, prays over them, and tucks them into a box, like offerings to a very lazy postal god. Even the children draw stick figures with excess for eyes, trees without leaves. One child drew a picture of the sky with a question mark in it. You saw it nailed to a post, fluttering in the wind like a tiny protest sign. You begin keeping your own account on a bit of bark you flatten near the fire. Each morning, if you can call it that, you scratch a sentence. Day 37. Still dark. Soup tasted like sock. Day 49. 2 chickens gone. Neighbor smiling too much. Day 60. Thought I saw the sun. Just my own reflection in puddle. Eventually, your diary becomes less record and more plea. You start writing things to yourself. Notes like stay awake. Don't trade the good boots. The mold only won once. One day you write, Dear Diary, I'm still starving. But I found a beetle. Crunchy. It helps a little. But not everyone writes. Some people talk instead. You hear them whispering stories around fires that are more smoke than heat. And the stories start to change. They used to be about saints and heroes. Now they're about omens. A woman says she saw a man walking out of the woods with a crown of ice. Another swears her cow gave birth to something that meowed. A third talks about lights in the sky green rippling like curtains of ghost fire. You realize people are cataloging the world falling apart in whatever way they can. Some use ink. Some use rumor. A few just scream into the wind and hope it counts as prayer. You try to record all of it. Because if there's one thing worse than this endless, lightless year, it's the idea that no one will remember it happened. And yet most of your records are about food. How little there was. What you tried to make. What you saw someone else chew on with an expression of vague betrayal. Your bark diary is basically a grim cookbook. Entry 72 grass soup. Surprisingly not terrible. May have hallucinated color. Entry 83 new recipe dirt cakes. Step 1. Try anything else. Entry 90 traded cousins' boots for rat jerky. Regret unclear. Sometimes you make jokes to yourself. Just enough to laugh under your breath and feel like a person again. Other times you write the same word over and over. Light. 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 You're not sure if you're calling it back or just trying to remember how it felt. Your hands start shaking, not from fear, hunger again, or maybe cold, or both. Your entries get shorter. Day 104. Still here? Day 109. Wish I wasn't. Day 113. Slept next to fire. Dreamt of peaches. Bit the log. And still you write. Because no matter what happens, whether the sun returns or not, whether food grows again or not, you want a record. You want proof. You want someone someday to pick up this bark scrap or wall etching and say, ah. So that's what it felt like. Meanwhile, the priests have started keeping divine logs. Not logs, you burn actual scrolls filled with dreams, visions, strange omens. It's like a holy complaint box stuffed with soot-smudged cries for help. The bishop is collecting them and plans to seal them in the church wall, just in case, because if the world ends, someone should know why. Even if the reason is simply a volcano sneezed on the sky. Of course, most people won't ever read your entries. Literacy isn't exactly a booming industry in the 6th century. You yourself mostly guess at the shapes, but still, you draw, scratch, invent new symbols. A circle with rays means hope. A jagged line means another storm. A hollow square means someone didn't come back. One morning, you look back through your record and realize you've drawn 13 hollow squares. You didn't mean to count them. You just did. You draw another next to the name Martina. She was old, kind, shared turnips without asking for trade. She went to sleep and didn't wake up. You draw a tiny loaf next to her square, the last thing she gave you. That night, you place your diary near the fire. You consider tossing it in. Use it as kindling. It would burn well. The ink is dry, the bark crisp. It would make the potatoes roast faster if you had potatoes, but you don't. So you fold it and tuck it under your bed straw. One more day, one more record, one more thread to hold on to, however thin. Somewhere in the distance, a baby cries. A dog barks. Someone shouts, "It's clearing." You stumble outside, heart thudding, and no, it's not. Just a patch of thinner fog, a trick of hope. You go back inside and add to your record. Day 124. Almost believed it. Again. Then you sketch a small, smiling sun, just to remember what one looks like. It's August, allegedly. You check the calendar scratched into the barn door, the one with tally marks and moon sketches, and it insists it's midsummer. But your toes don't agree. Neither does your breath, which fogs the air as you exhale into your soup. If it can be called soup. It's mostly warm water, flavored with hope and a half-mashed onion skin. You wrap your cloak tighter and step outside into a wind that feels like punishment. Leaves have started falling from the trees, prematurely brown and dry. The chickens are molting early. Even the bugs have retreated, which seems unnatural. You used to swat flies away from your porridge. Now you sort of miss them. They were loud, annoying, and alive, 3 qualities you no longer take for granted. The seasons have stopped behaving. Summer is supposed to smell like hay, sweat, and bees. Right now it smells like cold mud and silent dread. You glance up at the sky. The same as always. A dull, ashen smear, stretching in every direction, colorless and wrong. It's like the world has been wrapped in a wet wool blanket, and no one remembered to pull it off. You aren't alone in noticing. Old Helga mutters that her knees usually ache in the winter, but they've been screaming since June. The village blacksmith complains that his forge barely works because the air is too damp. Even the fire feels colder. He says this with the expression of a man who might punch the sky if it had a face. Children who should be swimming in rivers or playing in the sun are bundled in wool, their noses pink with frostbite. One small girl wears mittens her grandmother sewed from scraps of rabbit fur. She calls them summer gloves. No one laughs. Fields that should be golden with grain are patchy and frostbitten. The barley grew to half height, then turned yellow like it had stage fright. Beans shriveled on the vine. Even the weeds look uncertain, and weeds are usually very confident. You try to gather firewood, but find most of it damp and unusable. Everything is wet. Not rain wet, just cold wet. A constant seeping moisture that crawls into your boots, your bones, your very soul. You light a fire anyway. It smokes like a dying dragon and warms absolutely nothing. That evening, the village council meets. The headman, whose name might be Ulrich or Eric or some other syllable-heavy grumble, stands on a stump and declares, "This is unnatural." Everyone nods. You appreciate his bravery in pointing out what everyone already knows. He continues, "We must prepare for an early winter." Someone mutters, "You mean a continued winter?" There's an uncomfortable silence. Plans are made. Firewood quotas. Soup sharing. Emergency root cellar inspections. One family volunteers to take in the children if it gets worse. You don't say it out loud, but it has become an increasingly funny word. Like when wearing a fake mustache. Back home, you try to sleep. The blanket feels thinner than usual. Maybe it's shrinking. Maybe you are. The cold isn't sharp anymore. It's just there, constant, like a third wheel in your bed. You dream of warmth. Not fire, just sun on your skin. You wake up nearly crying. And the next day, you wake to frost on the inside of your walls. Frost. In August. You run your hand along it, half awed, half terrified. Your little brother, or maybe cousin, family trees are blurrier in famine years, draws a face in the ice. He names it Sir Frosty Pants. It becomes the house mascot. No one eats breakfast that day. There's nothing left. You try to convince yourself this is temporary. Maybe a cold snap, a seasonal fluke. Maybe the sun is just late. Maybe it's caught in traffic. But the cold lingers. And then the snow falls. It doesn't stick. It melts quickly. But the message is clear. The world has given up on pretending. The summer is over. Or maybe never arrived. It's hard to say. The lake freezes at the edges. The sheep grow thick coats early. Your hair starts to fall out from malnutrition. But on the bright side, that means less to wash in the icy river. Someone tries to hold a festival. An old harvest rite. Dancing, singing cider. It turns into 6 people swaying sadly around a fire, sipping thin broth and pretending it's ale. Someone plays a flute. It wheezes like it's also starving. You call it the festival of not dying. It catches on. As September arrives, not that anyone believes it, you try to salvage what crops remain. The root vegetables are the only survivors. Turnips, onions, whatever managed to hide underground long enough. You dig them up like treasure. You carry them home in both arms and announce, "Behold the feast." It lasts 2 days. After that, the cold gets bolder. You see icicles on fence posts. The cows start huddling like penguins. One pig walks into your hut uninvited and refuses to leave. You name him Lord Bacon and let him stay. You draw straws to see who gets to share body heat with him at night. He smells like damp despair, but he's warm. You hear that other villages have begun to migrate, south mostly, chasing rumors of sun like pilgrims chasing relics. A group passes through town, dirty, thin, silent. One of them has a map. It's just a piece of cloth with a sun drawn on it, and the words "may be here" written underneath. You offer them soup. They offer you silence. As October approaches, you can't remember what real warmth feels like. You sit by the fire and hold your hands near it, but they never quite thaw. Your bones click like frozen wood. You wear every tunic you own at once and still feel like a snowman in decline. You begin to believe that perhaps the world broke, that maybe some cosmic clock stopped ticking and now time is jammed. Perpetual dusk, eternal chill. The earth forgot how to rotate properly. Or maybe you all died, and this is the afterlife, a particularly underfunded afterlife with bad food and no management. The local priest suggests this is a long testing. You ask how long, he shrugs. You punch a snowdrift, and yet the village endures. People swap boots, share blankets, invent new words for hunger. One man starts telling jokes again, bad ones, but the effort counts. You start keeping a list of the dumbest ones. Your favorite. What did the sun say to the village? Nothing, because it's gone. You think that one's more poetry than joke, but still, you write it down. And one morning, someone swears they saw a beam of light break through the clouds. It lasts 3 seconds, but it's something. You gather at the hilltop with others. Everyone stares up waiting, hoping, but the clouds seal back like a wound. The sky isn't done yet. You go back home. Add another mark to the calendar. Day 162. Summer that felt like November. Again, you draw a sun, then cross it out, then draw it again smaller, just in case. When the world stops making sense, people start making stories. At first, it's little things, whispers. A merchant passing through says he saw 2 suns in the sky over the sea. A shepherd claims the moon wept blood one night. A child swears she saw a wolf speaking Latin. You don't know what Latin is, but you're impressed. Then come the visions. The town mystic, who normally sticks to herbal remedies and advice about which mushrooms are safe to lick, starts waking in the night covered in sweat, mumbling about fire beneath ice and a sky that bleeds ash. She begins carrying a pouch of salt and muttering prayers in a language she may or may not have invented. You begin to suspect she's not entirely wrong, because something is wrong. More wrong than failed crops and endless winter. There's a weight in the air, like every breath carries more than just cold. You feel watched, even in the fog. The chickens stare too long. The dogs growl at nothing. The forest is too quiet, and the wind whistles notes you're certain aren't natural. So, of course, people start reaching for reasons. Witchcraft is a popular option. Your neighbor accuses her cousin of summoning the ash with a poorly timed chant. Another blames the widow in the stone house who never blinks. A third insists it's because someone baked bread on a Sunday. You personally suspect it might be because someone named their pig after a bishop, but you keep that to yourself. Then there's the demon theory. A local boy claims he saw a tall figure in the woods, black cloaked, no face, just teeth and steam. The adults laugh it off. Then the boy goes missing. Suddenly, it's less funny. Search parties find only his wooden shoes in the snow and a trail that vanishes mid-step. The mystic draws a circle in the dirt and whispers for 3 hours. No one speaks of the boy again. The priest steps in. He holds longer sermons, talks about divine judgment, about humanity's sins rising too high like overfilled porridge. He quotes scripture with increasing volume. The word repent gets thrown around like flour in a chaotic kitchen. He adds more incense to services until the church smells like burnt herbs and anxiety. You go, of course, not because you're pious, but because it's warm inside. Also, you like watching people pretend to feel safe. One day, a traveler from the mountains brings a story. He claims a star fell into the sea and cursed the skies, that the ash isn't natural, it's punishment. He speaks of a kingdom swallowed by darkness, of black rivers and birds that flew backwards. His eyes are wild, his hands shake. His boots are made of stitched rat hide. You believe him more than you'd like. The villagers listen rapt. Someone asks what to do. He shrugs. Hide. Pray. Don't look the moon in the eye. Helpful. After he leaves, 3 families hang sun charms above their doors. The mystic mixes a new potion made of Nettle's goat spit and something she calls moon dust. A teenager drinks it and says he can hear colors now. Everyone agrees that's progress. One man carves symbols into his house frame. When asked, he says it's insurance. Another ties bells to his belt to scare off ghosts. A third carries a bag of onions for protection. You carry a rock you've named Gerald. He's not magic. He's just comforting. Then someone finds a bird with two heads. You don't know if it's real. Could have been taxidermied. Could have been glued. But it shows up on the chapel steps, beak-open eyes, glassy feet, curled inward like question marks. The priest nearly faints. The mystic smiles. You decide that's more unsettling than the bird. The omens keep coming. Frost forms in spirals. A lamb is born with no eyes. A rain of ash falls during a wedding, turning the bride's dress gray before the vows are even finished. No one claps. The village decides to hold a cleansing ritual. It's not clear who suggested it first. Maybe the mystic. Maybe the baker. Maybe the wind whispered it into someone's ear. But the idea spreads like hunger. If the gods, or spirits, or sky demons are punishing you, then maybe an offering would help. They choose a goat. It's the smallest one, with a limp and a habit of sneezing. You feel bad for it. But it's also the only goat no one's willing to eat, so symbolically, it makes sense. The villagers gather at the edge of the forest. Candles flicker. The air feels like it's holding its breath. The goat is dressed in flowers. The mystic chants. The priest mumbles Latin. Someone plays a flute. Then the goat is led into the trees and released. The villagers wait. Nothing happens, which somehow is worse than something happening. You all walk home in silence. The next morning, frost forms a perfect circle around the village. A dog howls. The baker dies in his sleep. The priest doubles his sermons. The mystic stops speaking entirely. You draw a new symbol in your diary, a spiral, open-ended. It means we don't know anything anymore. Somewhere in the mist, someone claims to hear a choir of voices singing in reverse. Another sees lights in the sky that flicker in rhythm. One boy wakes up, speaking a language no one taught him. He forgets it by sundown. A traveler passing through calls it the twilight year. You like the sound of that. It makes your suffering sound poetic. You imagine future generations telling your story. Back in 536, they'll say, they battled shadows and silence. You hope they never learn how much time you spent just trying to dry your socks. Because that's what daily life still is. You chop wood. You boil water. You huddle. You mutter. You stare at the sky and wonder if it's staring back. And in the quiet moments, between bites of stale turnip and awkwardly long silences, you begin to accept a new truth. Maybe there's no reason. Maybe there's no curse, no demon, no sin that tipped the world out of balance. Maybe it's just nature doing what nature does, collapsing unexpectedly. But then again, the frost does look suspiciously like runes this morning. You decide not to mention it. The thing about catastrophe is it rarely stays local. You'd think your little village tucked between soggy woods and a river that now freezes out of spite would be the center of the world's suffering. But news arrives slow, confused, and sometimes missing key details that tells you otherwise. Apparently, even kings are sneezing. At first, it's just rumor. A merchant from the south says the emperor in Constantinople is sick. Not just my nose tickles sick. More like sweating through silk sheets sick. That alone makes your whole hut pause Because if the richest man in Christendom can't afford not to be ill, what hope do you have sitting here sharing stew made from beet water? And regret. The word plague isn't being thrown around yet. Not officially. Not loudly. But it's hovering like a bird you don't want to name, because saying it out loud might invite it to roost in your rafters. The village priest says, sickness is a purging. The mystic now, back to speech after a week of contemplative staring, insists it's shadow rot of the soul. A blacksmith simply says, people cough, then die. You find his version the most useful. Back then, there were no real borders. Not for wind, not for germs, not for doom. And so, even without proper maps or timetables, disease travels. It comes down from the north like a cold sigh. It seeps up from the cities where too many people sleep too close and cough into each other's stews. It floats down rivers, trades on ships, sneaks across farmland on the backs of livestock and the bottoms of boots. And suddenly the talk isn't just about the dark skies anymore. It's about the sickness. Your neighbor's son develops a rash. No one wants to say it out loud, but they start keeping a distance. Another man gets chills in the night, even with a fire at his feet. You hear stories, some close, some far, of entire villages falling silent, of streets with no footsteps, of dogs howling outside locked doors. And then you hear about the emperor, not just sick, fevered, delirious, Justinian, ruler of a vast empire, coughing and muttering in a palace stuffed with gold and trembling servants. Some say he died. Others say he rose again. The facts are unclear, and you don't have parchment to track the updates. All you know is if kings are getting ill, no one is safe. Which is funny in a bleak kind of way. You've always assumed the powerful lived above all this, that their palaces had roofs thick enough to block out plague sky ash and divine punishment. Turns out gold can't insulate lungs, and silk doesn't stop fevers. Even the crown is no helmet against nature when it decides to throw a tantrum. Word spreads slowly, because most of the messengers are either dead coughing or too tired to bother, but the general picture starts to form. Famine in France, ash in Egypt, snow in Syria, crops failing in Ireland, and now sickness. Buboes, they say, swelling lumps, black spots, a fever that cooks your brain and leaves you speaking to ghosts. You're not a scholar, but you understand one thing: it's everywhere. And when things go wrong, everywhere, the rich start acting poor. Kings stop holding feasts. Courtiers wear garlic around their necks. Scholars flee libraries. People abandon cities. Even bishops start digging their own graves just in case. In your own village, things shift. The elder council stops talking about next year's planting. No one wants to jinx the idea that there'll even be a next year. The baker, who barely has flour, bakes what he calls last loaves, dense, bitter little rounds with a cross burned into the top, and no salt whatsoever. You eat one and cry, though mostly because it chips a tooth. The blacksmith sharpens tools, but not for work. For defense. If the sick come, he says, we'll need to be ready. You nod, then realize you've never actually fought anyone before. You consider sharpening a spoon. It feels symbolic. Children begin to play differently. Their games shift from pretending to be knights and dragons to pretending to be survivors. They play Plague Village. One child lies on the ground, and the others chant around him. Then someone cures him with a magic turnip. You admire their optimism. The church becomes a quarantine station. Not officially, of course, but when someone starts coughing, that's where they end up. Huddled near the altar, watched by a deacon with long arms and no sense of personal space. The building smells like incense sweat and boiled nettle tea. You check your own skin every night. Arms, neck, under the armpits. Any bump is suspect. Any scratch could be doom. You count sneezes like omens. Your dreams are a mix of fever memory and bread you never got to eat. And yet most days, you're still healthy. Or at least not dying. But you're aware of your fragility, that even if you survive the hunger, the cold, the ash, you could still be undone by a single cough from the wrong person. You start holding your breath when strangers pass. You carry a sprig of mint in your collar, just in case the air can be flavored into safety. You wipe your hands with snow. You avoid crowds, though, in a village of 35 that's not difficult. Someone says the plague might be a demon entering through your mouth while you sleep. You begin sleeping with your face wrapped in cloth. It doesn't help your breathing, but it soothes your mind. And then comes the quietest death of all, the village scribe, the one who knew how to read, how to write Latin, how to send letters to nowhere. He was old, gentle, always smelled like dried ink and stew. He develops a cough one morning. By evening, he's gone. His scrolls sit unfinished. One ends mid-word. And so on this day, the sun, no one knows what he meant to write. You think about how even knowledge has a shelf life. The mystic burns sage. The priest holds a fast. You bury the scribe beneath his own books, which he insisted was romantic. You're starting to see why. Then a raven lands on the chapel roof. Someone screams. Everyone agrees that's definitely a bad sign. You go home, sharpen the spoon, just in case. You wake to the taste of ash in your mouth. Not a metaphor. Real ash. Fine gray powdery. It coats your tongue like the memory of fire. You spit, cough, blink at the ceiling and wonder, did the chimney backdraft again? Or is the sky still breathing soot into your lungs? Same as yesterday, same as always. You open the door and get your answer. The frost is back. It hasn't really gone, but now it crunches louder, meaner. Each step across the village path is like walking on a frozen graveyard of leaves and broken promises. The ground isn't just cold, it's resentful. And then it starts snowing. Only it isn't snow. Not really. The flakes are gray. They fall like dandruff from a sick god. They melt on your skin into something that smells like charcoal and old metal. You stare upward and whisper the phrase everyone has memorized by now. This is probably fine. Your toes say otherwise. You've layered your boots with straw wool and something you think used to be part of a curtain. Still, you can't feel the tips anymore. It's a slow, creeping cold, like wet thread pulled through your veins. The mystic says the ash is clogging the heavens. Sunlight can't break through. She mutters, fingers wrapped around a stone, warm from her armpit. It's trapped, choked, like the breath of the world is holding in a cough. You nod solemnly. You don't know what that means, but it sounds right. Everyone's lungs feel tighter. You're not sick, not quite, but each breath carries the weight of something uninvited. The children have developed a permanent wheeze. The old men huddle closer to fires that burn dirtier by the day. Even the priest has taken to chewing mint leaves just to taste something that isn't sky soot. When you chop wood, the trees seem off, drier than they should be, brittle. The bark flakes like old skin. You wonder if even nature is giving up. You split a log and find a black streak through the center. You burn it anyway. It hisses like it's trying to tell you something. Inside, Everything smells like damp wool and resignation. You hang your cloaks near the fire, but they never fully dry. The walls sweat. The floorboards groan. The ceiling leaks ash sometimes, even when the wind is still. You patch it with mud. You patch everything with mud these days. You're mostly made of mud and sheer determination. Cooking becomes a test of will. The hearth smokes more than it flames. You blow coke's prey. You hold your breath when the fire catches, as if afraid it'll change its mind. The pot bubbles with something approximating stew. You pretend not to notice the strange gray flecks floating on top. You call them seasoning. The children call them sky crumbs. One day, the blacksmith tries to make a joke. If this ash keeps falling, we'll just build another mountain out of it. No one laughs. Not because it isn't funny, but because you've already started piling it. There's a heap behind the barn, waist high and growing. You don't know what else to do with it. It's too fine for bricks, too loose for insulation, too cursed for art. You shovel it daily. It returns nightly. At night, your throat burns. You try wrapping cloth over your mouth. It helps a little. You sleep with your head near the floor, hoping the ash floats higher. It doesn't. You cough in your dreams. Wake with dry blood at the corner of your lips. Not enough to panic, just enough to notice. The mystic gives you a potion. It tastes like mint vinegar and shame. You drink it anyway. Outdoors, the livestock wheeze. The pigs oink less. The chickens cluck with effort. The cows, well, you haven't had milk in weeks. They mostly just stare, eyes watery, like they've accepted their fate. Someone suggests digging a second well, hoping for cleaner water. They dig 10 feet and find mud. The project ends with a shrug. Then comes the wind. It howls through the village like a warning. Carries ash in great swirling ghosts. You wrap scarves around your face. Eyes sting. Skin burns. Someone ties wet rags to sticks and calls them sky brooms. They wave them at the clouds. You appreciate the creativity. The ash gets in everything. Blankets, bread, hair, hope. You stop cleaning. What's the point? Every bowl you scrub is gray again by sundown. Every pot you shine goes dull by morning. It's like the world is being powdered into forgetfulness. The children build an ashman, not a snowman. There's not enough clean snow. But ash plenty. They shape it into a lumpy figure. Give it stick arms and button eyes. Someone jokes it looks like the bishop. The bishop isn't present to object. You stare at the ashman. It doesn't melt. It just remains. A permanent reminder that things don't fade anymore. They settle, accumulate, layer like grief. One night you try to read by firelight. Not a book, you don't own one, but a scrap of parchment the scribe left behind. It's a hymn, maybe, or a recipe. The words are smudged, half erased by time and breath. You hold it close. The ash sticks to your fingers. You leave a thumbprint that wasn't there before. You've marked history in soot. Then someone starts coughing. A deep, rattling, full-body cough that sounds like it's trying to escape the ribcage. Everyone freezes. Eyes flick. Hands hover near knives, not out of violence, but ritual. The sick are often quarantined now, not officially, not by decree, just gently removed. The coughing man leaves his home, walks into the woods, says nothing. You never see him again. You add a line to the tally wall, then you add 2. The next day, your own cough starts. Not bad, just a scratch. You drink warm water. Gargle with ashless snow. Pretend it's nothing. It might be. Probably is. Hopefully. You sit near the fire and think, is this what the end feels like? But then a child laughs, loud, full, ugly. Someone falls in the snow and swears. Someone else farts. You chuckle. Because even in the gray people are still ridiculous. And maybe that's enough. Somewhere beyond your foggy horizon, a mountain roared, and the sky swallowed its breath whole. Today, modern scientists believe the sun vanished because a massive volcanic eruption spewed so much sulfur into the atmosphere that sunlight couldn't penetrate for months. Likely it wasn't just one, but at least three eruptions beginning around 535, 536, then again in 539, 540, maybe another in 547, as part of a century-long chill called the Late Antique Little Ice Age. It dropped summer temperatures by as much as 2.5 degrees Celsius below normal in Europe. In your world, you don't know any of this. You just know the air tastes like burnt metal, and the wind feels heavy. You look up at the sky and whisper mountain smoke. It's closer to truth than most guesses. Some monks in distant monasteries later write that the eruption probably came from Iceland based on particles in Swiss and Greenland ice cores and spikes of sulfur in tree rings. Others argue for an eruption in Ilopango, El Salvador, tied to the later cooling phase in 539-540. But that theory is debated, especially since newer dating pushes its eruption back a century. Trees everywhere tell the same story. Narrow rings marking poor growth with carbon and oxygen sheets, showing stress and sudden chill across continents. Scientists today call it a double event, one huge blast in 536, then another in 539, 540, boosted further by a lesser eruption in 547. Each drove ash and sulfate into the stratosphere, where winds ferried them across the northern hemisphere like a pollutant highway of despair. For you, though, it's simpler. You see ashfall, taste ash, breathe ash. The mystic smells smoke at dawn and says the world is choking. You believe her because your own breath sounds like a dying hearth. In distant lands, historians like Procopius later record that the sun gave forth its light without brightness, like the moon all year long. That winter seemed eternal with snow in China frost in summer, and poor souls wandering like sleepwalkers under a faded sun. Of course, some armchair scholars try other theories, a comet impact, comet dust, or even supernatural curses, but none have cratered a match. Volcano remains the prime suspect. One fringe theory blamed Krakatoa, but follow-up studies found no supporting geological evidence or sediments from that time, so it's mostly dismissed today. Instead, the weight of evidence, ice cores, tree ring anomalies, sulfur spikes, and conflicting rumor points to a high-latitude eruption in Iceland, along with tropical or North American eruptions soon after. Three distinct pulses of disaster designed a multi-year winter so powerful that entire empires staggered. You'd probably like to argue about it. Debate pros and cons over dinner, but there is no dinner. Debates are whispers now drowned by coughing fits and shared denial. Historian scientists today call what followed the volcanic blasts a true volcanic winter, widespread crop failure, famine, and the Justinian plague sweeping the already weakened masses. Millions die. Empires crumble. This chill zone lasts for decades, from 536 all the way to around 660 CE, depending on region. In your village, summer temperatures fall into autumn's grip. Rivers freeze in July. The barley sheaves bend under frost. Even the forest glades feel like crypts. You begin to suspect the ground plans to betray you too. And yet somewhere, in the memory of humankind, scientists sift ice dust layer by layer, reconstruct this frozen story. They still debate exact volcano location, but they all agree nature threw its full weight downward and the world bent Scholars today still phrase it like a math problem. A cooling of 2 to 3 degrees C sustained for years, a plunge into climate chaos that triggered migration, social upheaval, and a slow collapse of Rome's fragile hold on its territories. You'd likely call it simple sky broke, sun vanished. You don't need degrees in geology to know when your bones ache from cold and your fire is mostly smoke. There's an open debate among scholars whether volcanic eruption alone can explain the sequence, or if additional factors like solar minimum and ice ocean feedback magnified it. But that's academic. Your reality is soot in your mouth and frost in July. Still, there is insight here. This ruin began far away. You're suffering the silent aftermath of an unknown mountain's tantrum. No hero fought it. No treaty ended it. Just Earth itself, recalibrating without asking permission. The irony, centuries later, people rebuild farms, return children, play in sunlight again. But you were there when the sky blanked out. You felt collapse in your bones. You lived it. And your story is etched in ash, buried beneath snow, whispered in frost, but never fully forgotten. Cities, it turns out, don't explode when they die. They unravel. It starts with the market stalls, fewer goods, fewer merchants, then none. The square that once hummed with shouts, footsteps barter, and bread now echoes with wind and the occasional feral goat. Next go the streets. Not literally, they're still there, cobbled and crooked, but no one walks them. The dust settles too thickly. Windows stay shut. A shutter bangs, and no one bothers to close it. The city still has buildings. It still has a name, but it no longer breathes. And that's when you know it's dying. You're not from a city, of course. You're from the kind of place where pigs sleep inside and roofs leak selectively. But once long ago, or maybe just 3 springs back, you visited a city. Maybe Ravenna. Maybe Antioch. Maybe just the closest thing your region offered with more than 2 streets. It had fountains. Real ones. With water that sprayed for decoration instead of just necessity. People strolled, not because they needed to, but because it was fashionable. You remember that word like a joke. Fashionable. As if clothes ever mattered more than warmth. That city is gone now. Not leveled. Not burned. Just emptied. Or half emptied. Or quarter alive. Because when the food stopped coming, so did the people. And when the sun stopped shining, no one stayed to paint frescoes or compose hymns. The rich were the first to leave off in caravans with guards and stews and too much luggage. Then the scribes. Then the merchants. And finally the rats, who apparently have standards. Only the very old, the very sick, or the very stubborn remained. You'd call them survivors. But now they're just ghosts in stone houses. Someone you knew once went back to that city, said the temples were full of straw, and the bishop's chair was being used to dry fish, said the aqueduct cracked and now carried moss, said the statue in the square, the one with the pointing finger, had pigeons nesting in its eye. And still, the city hadn't fallen. Just sighed. Not that villages did much better. Back in your own world, the changes came slower, but no less cruel. A family left one morning and never came back. The well ran dry for 3 days, then tasted like iron. The cows stopped lowing. A row of cottages lost their roofs one storm, and no one bothered fixing them. Why repair a future that's clearly canceled? The children stopped learning names of months. Time became before the ash. After the goats died. That week, we ate only moss. No one says next year anymore. Instead, they say, if the sun returns, or if it ever warms again, or simply maybe. You visit another village once. It's 5 miles away, far enough to feel foreign. You trade a jar of dried leeks for beeswax. Their square is still intact. They even have music. A man plays a string instrument badly, but enthusiastically. You think about staying, but the air there smells like mold and desperation. You go home. Your own village isn't healthy, but at least it's yours. Still, you can feel the slow collapse. The priest no longer preaches every Sunday. Sometimes he just sighs and stares at the ceiling. The mystic's hut collapsed, and she now sleeps under a tree. Says the roots keep her safe. You try not to ask from what. The blacksmith broke his anvil last month and hasn't tried to replace it. He sharpens things on a rock now. It works. Sort of. One boy builds a tiny city out of stones behind his family's cottage. He calls it Better Town. It has walls, towers, gates. A stick figure lives in each home. Then one morning, you see him smashing it. Quietly, carefully. One wall at a time. He looks at you and says, "Too many ghosts." You nod. You understand. But the big cities, the ones that mattered, those don't go quietly either. Some resist. Constantinople fights to keep order. Food is rationed. Grain is imported. Ships still dock, though fewer than before. The emperor, recently recovered from plague, walks the palace like a man made of wax and worry. They light torches in daylight now to mimic sunlight. They name the clouds. They hold festivals for warmth. One noblewoman is said to keep a room filled with mirrors just to remember what brightness looks like. You hear rumors that libraries have closed, not because the books are gone, but because no one can concentrate. A scholar in Alexandria was found weeping over a scroll he couldn't read. The light was too dim. His tears smudged the ink. His assistant quit and became a fisherman. Elsewhere, cities change shape. Walls get shorter, streets narrower, public baths turn into goat pens, temples become storage rooms. People stop building up. They build down, underground, into cellars, into caves, into the past. Rome, you hear, has rats the size of cats. Ravenna has statues with empty eye sockets. Carthage sleeps under dust. Even Egypt, land of sun, land of gods, is cold. The Nile floods wrong. The granaries are empty. The priests light fires on the pyramids and pray to stars that don't answer. You don't know what a pyramid looks like, but you picture it shaped like sorrow. The world isn't ending in fire. It's ending in slowness. One skipped meal at a time. One crumbling stone. One name forgotten. And you're still here. Breathing. Watching. Whispering to yourself that maybe tomorrow will be brighter. That maybe someone in one of those ruined cities still writes, still draws, still remembers. Because even when cities fall apart, memory can survive. And that's something, at least. Faith is warm, or at least it's supposed to be. That's what you were taught. That belief can shield you, like a cloak in winter, like bread that never runs out, like a fire that crackles, even when the wood is damp. But lately, even your prayers feel cold. It started small. The priest began forgetting words. Not the big ones, not the sacred ones, but the simple stuff. The good mornings, the peace be with you, the amen. They come out thinner, duller, as if passing through too much smoke to reach your ears clearly. He's still faithful, still tries, still lights the incense and blesses the fields and mutters Latin at clouds. But something's shifted. You see it in his eyes, glassy rimmed with ash. Like he's no longer quite sure anyone's listening. You kneel anyway. Because what else is there? The chapel's roof sags. Its altar cloths are stained with mold and ash streaks. The wooden cross has splinters where the varnish once gleamed. Someone carved initials into the pews, bored or desperate, or maybe just making a mark before vanishing. Even the bell sounds tired. Services happen when they can. Sometimes twice a week. Sometimes none. Sometimes just you and the priest, both staring into smoke, both pretending this means something. He preaches softer now. Less about sin, more about endurance. Blessed are those who don't give up, he said last week, voice shaking. For theirs is something better. You admired the honesty. Other villagers begin crafting their own beliefs. Some return to older things. Forest spirits, river guardians, the sun as a sleeping lion, the moon as a jealous lover. You hear one woman whisper a chant into her soup before eating. Another buries coins under her hearth for sky luck. The mystic leans into her role. She paints symbols on her cheeks and speaks in riddles. Once she sat in a circle of salt and refused to move until it snowed inside the chapel. It never did, but someone gave her a turnip for effort. A young man, barely grown, claims to see visions. He says the ash writes messages if you stare long enough. He believes the gods are testing your memory, that every gray flake is a forgotten name. He starts collecting them in jars. You ask how he can tell them apart. He just grins. One night, a traveling preacher passes through, tall, wild-eyed, dusty robes and a voice like firewood cracking. He speaks of repentance, of punishment, of divine rage burning through the bones of the earth. He blames the cold on lust, greed, wool dyed the wrong color, and insufficient fasting. He draws a crowd. You watch from the back, arms crossed, mouth tight. You've fasted enough, eaten less than enough. You're not convinced a stricter Lent is going to solve the sky. But people are desperate. They need reason, a map, a punishment they can understand. The preacher gives it to them, simple, blunt, loud. The next day, someone sets fire to the mystic's hut. It doesn't burn well, too wet, but the message is clear. She moves to the woods, lives in a hollow tree, says the squirrels are more tolerant. Faith begins to fracture. The priest refuses to condemn the mystic, says she's part of the greater mystery. Others disagree. One man suggests turning the chapel into a granary. Another paints over a saint's face. A third starts a new service under a different tree every week. He says it keeps the spirits guessing. You keep going to the chapel, not because it works, but because it's quiet. You light candles, even if they sputter. You whisper names, even if no one answers. You close your eyes and try to remember sunlight. That too is prayer. Then comes the eclipse, a proper one, total, the kind that makes the animals scream and the roosters crow at midnight. You hear about it before you see it, rumors from a nearby village that the sky folded in half. You dismiss it until the day darkens at noon. Not ash dark, not cloud dark, but swallowed, a disk sliding across heaven like a curtain. People run, scream, pray. You stare. It's beautiful. Terrifying, yes, but clean, honest. For once the sky tells you it's changing. For once darkness feels deliberate, not accidental. When the light returns, no one is the same. The preacher leaves town, says he's going to climb a mountain and apologize to the stars personally. The priest begins reciting the Beatitudes backward. The mystic returns from the woods and declares she's now married to the moon. You wish her well. Faith isn't gone. It's just shifting. No longer a single story. More like scattered pages drifting in wind landing where they're needed. You keep yours simple. You say good morning to the cold. You thank your soup, however thin. You bow to the ash before sweeping it. You touch the chapel door as you pass. You whisper to whatever's listening, just one more day. And most days that's enough. You didn't think it could get worse? But then the rats got bold. They're not new. Rats have always been around, sneaking into grain sacks, nesting in boots, watching you from rafters with their glinting, unblinking eyes. You've never liked them, but you respected the arrangement they stay mostly out of sight, and you pretend you have control. That unspoken pact is over. Now, they're everywhere, scuttling across the chapel floor, sleeping in the hay before the cows get there, fighting pigeons for breadcrumbs in broad daylight. Someone swears they saw one chewing on a candle. Another saw two dragging a chicken leg like they were hauling treasure. Then come the fleas. You don't notice them at first. Just a few more itches. A red spot here, a scratch there. But the scratching becomes frantic. Then someone develops a lump. Not a bruise, not a bug bite. A lump. Hard, hot, purple-black. Under the arm, behind the knee, near the groin. Always hidden, always growing. And then they die. Not slowly, not dramatically, just gone. One day, they're scratching and muttering. The next, they're cold and still. The body goes stiff fast. You stop asking for explanations. You already know what's happening. The priest calls it the burning swell. The mystic calls it the soul bubble. You call it the reason you sleep with a scarf over your mouth now. Because this is different. The cold was cruel. The ash was confusing. The famine was lingering. But this is fast. This is the Justinian plague, named for the emperor who survived it barely. Some say his recovery was a miracle. Others say he hasn't truly recovered at all. Just moves through his marble palace like a half-dreaming man, haunted by the smell of incense and vinegar-soaked bandages. The disease doesn't care for names. It sweeps east to west, south to north, across continents and across your doorstep. It travels faster than letters, faster than fear. The cities are hit hardest, of course, too many people packed too tightly, with too few rats to go around. But the countryside isn't safe. You thought you had distance, space, a buffer zone of trees and rivers and good intentions. But death is not picky. And the fleas ride in on fur on boots on the wind itself. The first to die in your village is the miller's apprentice. 17. Healthy. Fond of turnip pie and singing slightly off-key. One day he sneezes. The next he's buried. No ceremony, no hymns. Just a shallow pit in a corner of the field. Dirt mixed with frost and shame. You try not to dwell on it, but more follow. The blacksmith's wife. The old man with no teeth. A child too young to know the words for pain. Each with the same swelling, the same fever, the same end. The village changes again. No one touches. No one shares tools. Everyone wears layers, scarves, gloves, veils. Not for warmth anymore, but defense. The chapel becomes a quarantine space. Again, not for prayer now, but for waiting. People sit inside alone, staring at the altar and counting breaths. The priest blesses them through the door. No one wants to go in. No one wants to leave someone in there. It's a constant loop of fear-love and cloth-wrapped hesitation. The mystic stops seeing people entirely. She leaves herbs by doorsteps, notes scratched into bark. You're not sure how she gets food. Maybe she doesn't. Maybe she's living on moonlight and spite. Or maybe she's just next. Because now the plague doesn't ask permission. It doesn't start with the sickly. It grabs the strong, the young, the ones who were supposed to carry the rest. A mother loses her son. A boy loses his father. A girl loses her name because no one left remembers it. You try not to count the dead, but you do anyway. You keep a tally on the back of your door in charcoal. Each line a name, each mark a heartbeat snuffed. You stop naming them after the seventh. It's easier that way, cleaner. You boil everything now. Water, milk, cloth, your hands. You've never been so clean and never felt so filthy. Someone suggests fire, not for warmth, but for purification. They burn the sick's bedding, their clothes, their homes if the family is gone. The ash rises and joins the rest. You wonder if it's possible to tell plague smoke from sky ash. Probably not. You think you've survived. Again, you feel healthy. Your family, those who remain, are strong. You've avoided contact. You've said your prayers. You've worn the garlic. You've followed every whispered ritual. But one morning, your sister coughs. Not much. Just a scratchy sound. Dry. Barely there. You freeze. She waves you off. Dust in the throat, she says. Just dry air. She smiles. The next day, she's pale. The day after, she's fevered. By nightfall, she's gone. You don't cry. You can't. There's no water left in you. Just smoke. The mystic sends a note. Burn the body. Say no names. Close your eyes. You do. You obey. You watch flame lick the sky like a tongue of judgment. The ash returns to the ash. Somewhere, a child is born. Somewhere else, a village survives untouched. But not here. Not now. You can feel the weight of centuries pressing down. You don't have the word pandemic, but you understand the shape of it, the sound of empty silence, the echo of weeping through boarded windows. You start talking to the rats, not aloud, just mentally. You name one Gerard. He seems intelligent. You leave him crumbs and whisper, "Go easy on us, Gerard." He twitches his whiskers like he understands. It helps, a little. Then after weeks, the plague slows, not stops, just eases. The tally wall stays unchanged for 3 days. Then 5. Then a week. The chapel remains empty. The incense goes stale. The priest whispers, "Maybe it's over." No one believes him. But no one corrects him either, because what else can you do? Hope is the last thing to rot. And this hope, thin, trembling, ash-covered, is yours. The silence is the loudest part now. You thought the plague would end in noise, screams, bells, cries for help. And yes, there was noise at first. But now it's mostly just the wind. You wake to it whistling through the cracks in your door. A low, mournful sound, like the world sighing in its sleep. You open your eyes and stare into the dark, and you don't hear birds. You don't hear children. Just wine dust and your own breath. The ash still falls. Not constantly, but often enough to keep the village in a permanent state of gray. It coats everything. Your table, your bed, your hair. Sometimes it feels like you're sleeping under a blanket made of old regrets. You sweep it. Always sweep it. It returns. The only thing more consistent than the ash is the coughing. It's different now, not as sharp, not as urgent, but it's there, in the chapel, in the fields, in the silence between sentences. Everyone coughs like punctuation. It's not always plague anymore. Sometimes it's just lungs too tired to keep dust out. You no longer ask, "Are you sick?" You ask, "How sick?" That's the new scale. Not healthy or ill. Just still standing, or mostly upright. Or don't look too closely. Even the priest has stopped asking questions. He still blesses things. Bread, blankets, a dead goat once. But his eyes are glassy. His hands tremble when he lifts the cross. You suspect he's forgotten parts of the service, but no one notices. No one corrects him. Not because they agree, but because no one remembers what the words used to be. Religion used to be the rhythm of your week. Now it's more like background noise. You show up. You kneel. You think about stew, about missing socks, about the one rat with the limp tail who hasn't been seen lately. Even the mystic seems tired. She's stopped painting her face. She just walks around with a long stick and taps trees, muttering things like still alive and maybe next season. No one's sure what she means. You think she might be talking to the roots. There's a sense that nothing is truly clean anymore. Not the air, not the food, not the thoughts in your head. You catch yourself thinking things like, if I lost another finger, I could still grip a spoon. Or, that house is empty now. Maybe I should just take it. You don't act on them, but you think them, and that's new. Even animals are quieter. The cows barely moo. The chickens cluck like they're ashamed of something. The goats, normally chaotic little gremlins, now just stare. One sits in the middle of the path every morning and refuses to move. You step around it. You always say, "Excuse me." It feels polite. The food situation is, well, situation feels generous. The turnip stew is now just turnip water. You've forgotten the taste of anything crisp. Everything is boiled, smoked, or forgotten. You once found an old piece of cheese under the floorboards and cried, not from joy, from the memory of what cheese used to be. The baker tried to make bread last week. No one knows how. Flour is a myth, but he did. It was dense bitter and had the texture of wet bark. He called it morning loaf. Everyone took a piece. Everyone said thank you. No one finished it. There's no firewood left. Just furniture. You've burned 2 stools, 1 small shelf, and what used to be a ceremonial bench. You're eyeing the bed frame next. You wrap yourself in blankets during the day now. You don't pretend it's temporary. You don't pretend anything anymore. Hope has been reduced to tiny things. A warm spot in the sun when the sun appears. A dry patch of hay. A story from someone who visited a nearby town and came back not dead. That's as good as it gets. Someone says they saw a bird, not a crow, not a pigeon, a real bird, colorful, singing. You want to believe them. You go outside and look for it. You don't find it, but you stare at the trees anyway. It's something to do. There's talk of leaving, starting over somewhere less ruined, somewhere with food, with clean water, with fewer ghosts, but no one really knows where that is, or how to get there, or what to do when they arrive. So no one moves. You just keep going. One step, one chore, one breath at a time. Dust coats the chapel. No one sweeps anymore. The cross leans at a strange angle like it's tired too. The mystic ties bits of cloth to trees. For luck, she says, you tie one too, just in case. The wind picks up. You hear it howl and think it's only the wind. You hope. You stop digging graves after the 27th, not because you've run out of dead, because you've run out of ground. The earth won't open anymore, not easily. It's frozen most days, clinging to its secrets like a miser. The ash seeps down too, mixing with the soil, turning it into something between clay and sorrow. You switch to shallow burials. Then you switch to none at all. At first it feels wrong, like giving up. But after a while, you stop thinking of the dead as people. You start thinking of them as burdens, objects, things that used to be. And that's how you know the world has truly changed. You remember your first funeral clearly. The whole village showed up. The priest wore his best cloak. Someone played a flute. There was bread, afterward actual bread. You cried. Everyone did. It felt like honoring something sacred. Now, now the priest just nods and mumbles a few words through a scarf. You wrap the body in whatever cloth is available, a sack, a curtain, once, even a cloak that still smelled like smoke, and you drag it to the edge of the woods. No one sings, no one weeps. The trees do not care. You place a rock on top. That's the new custom. One rock per person, a little pile for each. The idea is that the stones will remember if you forget. You try to believe that. Sometimes when the wind howls just right, you think you hear names in it. Maybe it's your memory playing tricks. Or maybe the stones really do whisper. There are other methods too. Burning is popular when wood is available. You ration your firewood, one log for warmth, one for cooking, one for cremation. It's a bleak math problem you solve daily. Some bodies are left in the chapel, not by plan, just by circumstance. The door is locked now, but you know what's inside. You walk past quickly. You breathe through your sleeve. The mystic says spirits can't rise in smoke. She insists on burying hers when she gets them. She uses a shovel carved from bone. You don't ask whose. Once during a particularly hard week, you pass by the field and see a pair of legs sticking out from a snowbank. You stare. You don't recognize the boots. You don't ask questions. You simply add another stone. There are no headstones anymore. No carvings, no markings. The ground is crowded with silence. You used to say their names aloud. Now you hum. Just a note. A low, drawn-out tone. It's easier. Safer. Harder to forget when you don't say too much. Children start inventing rituals. One ties bits of string around her wrist every time someone dies. Another buries pebbles and pretends they're memory seeds. You admire the effort. A boy makes a doll out of ash and straw. Names it Old Friend. Carries it everywhere. When someone dies, he whispers the name to the doll. He says it keeps the soul's company. You believe him. One day, someone dies who had no name. Not really. Just that man who fixed roofs, or the one with the squint. No one knows where he came from. No one knows what he believed. But he helped patch walls during the last frost, and he once gave a child a pebble that sparkled. You bury him by the big oak. You name the grave Sparkle. It feels right. People start visiting that spot. Leave coins, bread crusts, a single feather once. Grief changes shape. It's not loud anymore. Not dramatic. It's quiet. Flat. Like a smothered fire. You feel it in your bones. In the way you stop reacting. In the way you carry things a little slower. And how long it takes to remember what someone's voice sounded like. You try to keep a list. Not of the dead, those are too many. But of the mist. You write the way Mira hummed before sleep. You write the man who made honey jokes. You write the red scarf someone wore, can't remember who. The parchment runs out. You start carving into bark. The mystic calls it bark book. You laugh harder than you have in months. Then one day, someone goes missing, and no one notices. You realize it 3 days later. The house is empty. The boots are gone. No word, no body, no trail, no stone. And you feel a panic you haven't felt in weeks, not because they're gone, but because you didn't mark it. You run to the edge of the forest. You find a rock, just one. You place it near the others. You whisper, "I'm sorry." You don't know who you're saying it to, but it helps. Someone paints white dots on each burial stone, says they're stars, so the dead won't get lost. You start doing it too. One rock, one dot, a sky built from bones and ash. The chapel begins to collapse. The roof caves in on the west side. You don't repair it. It's too far gone. The wind whistles through the hole. Birds roost in the rafters. You let them. They seem like good company. Sometimes a stranger passes through. Not often. Maybe once a month. They stay a night. They eat. They share stories if they're feeling generous. Then they move on. Most don't look back. One leaves a name carved into a tree Joran. Pass through. That's it. You add a stone for Joran, just in case. The world feels quieter now. Not empty, but muffled. Like everything is wrapped in wool. You don't know how many are left. In your village. In the world. You stopped counting when the numbers became shapes instead of people. But you know you're still here. Still breathing. Still walking past the rocks each morning. Still adding new ones. Still remembering you haven't seen salt in months. Not real salt. Not the white grainy kind you used to sprinkle on porridge or rub into wounds or trade for eggs. You've dreamt of it sometimes. A coarse pinch between your fingers. A small miracle that made food less gray. Now your stew tastes like boiled apology. And not just because you're a bad cook. The trade roads are gone. Not blocked. Not broken. Just gone. You used to see carts every few weeks, creaking down the old Roman roads pulled by horses with ribs like washboards. They carried barrels of wine bolts, of cloth sacks of lentils, sometimes even cinnamon if you were lucky. But then came the ash, then the cold, then the plague. Now nothing comes in, nothing goes out. The village is an island surrounded by silence. You don't remember the last time you saw a horse that wasn't yours. You haven't seen a wheel rut in the mud that didn't belong to someone you know. The road to the next village is overgrown. The stone mile markers are tilting like they're giving up. Once a trader arrived unexpectedly. Old, bearded, wrapped in too many cloaks. He didn't sell anything, he just wanted shelter. You gave him soup. He gave you a story. He said he'd been to a city where the marketplace was empty and no one noticed, where spices sat untouched in crates because no one could taste anymore, where the docks were rotting and ships were tied up like forgotten toys. You asked him what he was trading now. He shrugged and said, "Memories." You didn't laugh. You gave him another bowl of soup. The next morning, he was gone. He left a single button behind. You wear it around your neck. Not for fashion, just as proof that strangers used to exist. You try to remember what trade felt like. Excitement mostly. The thrill of seeing something foreign. A coin from the East. A jug glazed in colors you don't have words for. A loaf of bread shaped like a bird. A scarf that smelled like citrus. These were glimpses of a world beyond yours. And now they're gone. You've begun reusing everything. Cloth is patched until it looks like a map. Boots are more whole than leather. You make soap out of old fat and prayers. You've invented 5 new ways to cook moss. None of them are good. The mystic starts trading dreams. Bring her a bundle of dry herbs, she'll tell you what your sleep meant. A bone from a rabbit. She'll whisper the future into your ear. You don't believe her, but it's something to do. Someone tries to restart trade. They carve a sled, load it with dried beets and smoked fish, tie it to 2 exhausted goats, and walk it toward the horizon. They never come back. You hope they made it, but you also hope they didn't, because if they saw what's out there and still returned, it must be worse than here. You once had coins, not many, just a few. You kept them under a loose floorboard wrapped in a handkerchief. When the ash started falling, you added a sprig of lavender to keep them fresh. You buried them last winter, not for protection, out of guilt. They felt like relics from a religion no one practices anymore. The new currency is favors. Trade you a bowl of soup for a bundle of wood. Trade you a coat repair for a quiet night in your barn. Trade you a secret for a story. It's less efficient, but somehow more honest. Someone found a Roman coin last week, buried near the old well. They brought it to the mystic who said it was cursed. They dropped it into the stream and crossed themselves 3 times. The stream hasn't changed, but people drink from it with more reverence now. You think about what used to come down those trade roads. Olives, cloth, ink, soap, ideas, all vanished. It's not just goods that have gone, it's news. You don't know what's happening in the capital, or if there even is a capital. You heard rumors that the emperor died twice, that the sea froze, that elephants now pull carts in the north. You believe all of it, or none of it. It doesn't matter. You're too far away. Once a young boy asked what pepper tasted like. You said, like anger you can eat. He nodded solemnly, then asked what sugar tasted like. You said, like joy, but faster. He seemed satisfied. You regret not telling him about honey. There's a warehouse down the old road. Empty now. Just wooden shelves and cobwebs. But once before the ash, it was filled with crates from all over. You snuck inside once as a child. Got caught sniffing a jar of nutmeg. The trader laughed. Gave you a fig. Told you never to come back. You still remember the fig. Sticky, sweet, alive. You pass the warehouse sometimes. The door swings on rusty hinges. Inside, there's just dust and maybe one broken bowl. You still peek in, just in case. There's talk of rebuilding trade. Dreams mostly. Idle sketches on bark. A sled route to the coast. A raft downriver. A signal fire system. None of it happens. But talking about it feels good. It means you remember what connection felt like. And sometimes remembering is the first step to surviving. Harvest used to be a celebration. A noisy, messy thing with carts, creaking scythes, flashing people laughing, even if your stomach grumbled all season long. You'd gather turnips, barley, onions, and someone would probably sneak off with a hunk of cheese and dare you to chase them. Not anymore. Now harvest is about inches, not bushels. The ash has stolen sunlight. The cold stopped crops from growing. What little grew is twisted, weak gray-brown. A root vegetable might curl under the soil like it's trying to hide. A stalk of barley might reach halfway, then snap. This year's harvest barely made a platter. You stand in the field, shovel in hand, looking at what was supposed to be potatoes. Instead, small, knobbly lumps that look like petrified brains. Bitter, woody, barely edible. You gather them anyway. Neighbors come to stare, barter, even taste. Each bite tastes like defeat, dusty, cold, thin. But it's food. You swallow. People trade what little they've grown. A handful of kale for a jar of salted goat droppings. A spoonful of mush for 2 grass stalks. Someone once traded a half-spoiled onion for the use of your pumpkin patch for a week. Pumpkins, it turns out, grow better than anything else. They survive frost-ash despair. They taste like plainsong, old, thick, a little sweet, a lot gritty. So pumpkins are sacred now. You grow them in every spare patch. You eat them, clean them, string their vines into wreaths. The seeds are treasure. You roast them when you can. In your dreams, you bake pumpkin pies with sugar and spice. You wake up chewing your blanket. Nobody laughs. Culinary ingenuity reaches odd levels. You invent things like turnip chips, slice thin, bake over coal cover in ash seasoning. Tastes like cardboard with regret. Another attempt, moss stew flavored with lichen oil. You learn to rinse twice. Someone even tried boiling bones to extract marrow, but they forgot fungus grows on bones too. They survived. Barely. Composting becomes a luxury once. You used to toss peelings into a pile. Now you eat them. The crispy potato skin becomes salad. The carrot top becomes tea. Marsh grass becomes, well, it becomes regret. But you try anyway. Bread remains the holy grail. Sometimes someone kneads dough from wild grasses mixed with stale barley meal. It doesn't rise. It doesn't taste good. But someone blesses it. Everyone tastes it. They call it bread of last hope. But most people just call it bread of laughter because they laugh afterwards. The baker who made it looks proud. He deserved it. The mystic began experimenting too. She created memory broth, extract flavors from scraps people keep complaining about, then combined them with herbs she swears smell like sunshine. You smell it. It's slightly less depressing. You sip. You remember sunlight. The priest added salt back to soup once. It was a scandal. Word spread. Half the village cheered. The other half shook angry fists at his door for giving them hope and salt. You eat what you can. You hoard seeds. You clean rocks. You barter, you beg, you improvise. You memorize recipes onto bark scraps so one day someone might read them. You call a meeting, a rare gathering where people share what taught them to eat again. Pine bark, thickener, birch sap, sweetener, boiled moss pudding. None of it's good, but it fills more than silence. You begin street markets again. Small tables, dirt planters. People trade seeds, scarves, stories. Someone writes, "We used to trade dreams. Now we trade seeds on a board made of latrine wood." You buy seeds, walnut, beans, dandelion, all fragile things. You plant them in tubs and pots in your cupboard. You hope. You think maybe next year. This harvest becomes a strange holiday, not of abundance, of surviving. You wear pumpkin lanterns carved with faces. You hum songs no one remembers. You bake muddy cakes for the village dogs. You light a fire and thank it. You promise the earth you'll try harder next year. Because despite everything, despite ash plague, frost, hunger, the act of planting something dead into dust and hoping for life feels dangerous. Also sacred. You sleep better that night, not because you're full, because you believed again. And that's how harvest returns. Not in kilos or bushels, but in hope, however cracked. You begin to notice it in their eyes. The animals, those creatures you once took for granted, no longer look normal. It's not fear or illness. It's something more unsettling, a dawning awareness. Maybe they know what you've forgotten. Let's start with the birds. They stopped nesting. Not just here across nearby woods, too, people say. But some mornings you still hear a crow calling at dawn. It's startling, unexpected. You squint toward the sky, even though there's no sun to squint at. The crow flies in circles, then lands on the chapel roof and stares at you. You swear it nods. Then it flies off into the gray. Chickens grow sluggish. Their usual chaos, the morning clucks and scratching dust baths. Gone. They stand in groups under lean roofs, feathers matte beaks closed. You go to their coop one morning and find one sleeping upright. Standing up, you poke it. It blinks slowly, then flaps its wings and goes back to ignoring you. Chickens refusing to flap? That's not normal. Goats become judges. 3 of them now sit in a semicircle at dawn watching you leave the hut. You swear they're judging. Lambs born during the ash period emerge with twisted horns or extra legs, or in one case, no legs at all, just a stubborn head that refused to detach. The local healer declared it a sign that you should mend your ways. Naturally, the goat that carries that lamb refuses to eat. Horses become lonely poets. The old mare you branched off from the trader days now stands by itself near the field. She lowers her head, breathes heavy, and neighs at nothing. Sometimes she stares at the old well, and tears drip from her eyes. You swear you see droplets in her mane like dew, or dust glinting in dark. Dogs don't bark anymore. They spend hours lying in the ashes staring at stone piles. One dog you used to pet now refuses your touch. When you pass, it turns its head away. You wonder if it senses someone dead beneath the stone pile in your yard, someone you buried without a ceremony. Maybe it knows bones better than most people. Cats multiply in silence. Your barn once had 2. Now you count 5, 6, 7. They slip into shadows, vanish in doorways, then appear again. Their eyes glow, which they never did before. Each time they change position, they blur as if they warp the air. The mystic says these cats are familiar spirits, ancestors returning through feline form. You don't say anything, but you start stuffing extra scraps and leaving them before you sleep. Wild beasts come closer. One evening, you spot tracks near the river. Not boars, not wolves, but something tall with long toes. It walked in a straight line toward your house. You follow it. See nothing. Then it's gone, just marks in mud and the weight of something watching. Then there's the water. Once flowing clear from the spring, it's now cloudy most days. Fish swim in odd patterns. They don't school. They scatter. You dip a jar in the stream and lift it. The water doesn't reflect your face. It shows fog. Maybe memory. Maybe nothing. You flick it onto the ground. The ground seems to absorb it. Even insects behave oddly. Flies avoid your kitchen. Mosquitoes bite your neighbor more than you like. They know who still draws breath. Ribbons of ants follow invisible lines, go in circles, begin at nothing, and end at nothing. You catch one in your palm. It just stares back before dissolving into ash. You wonder if the world is forgetting how to act normally. Not just humans. Everything. Earth, air, water, beasts. Even death behaves strangely now. Some bodies don't rot. You see a cat you thought died months ago lying in a corner, but intact, unbloated eyes open. You throw stones at it. It doesn't move. It's still. But your guts churn. Nature used to mean life. Now it means memory. There's a story, someone whispers, about a bird that blew across the sea from a place where sunlight still exists. It landed in a tree and sang once. Just once. Then fell silent forever. The person who heard it says the bird spoke 1,000 words and they felt understood. You want to believe it. So you stand in the field at midday, or what you think is midday, and sing a small song you remember from childhood. You falter. The crow answers once, just once, and then it flies away, its shadow swallowed by fog. That's strange enough to count as news. You begin drawing symbols next to the barn, a chicken silhouette, a goat head, a wavy line for tracks, a keeper's catalog of animals gone odd. The mystic calls it the bestiary of loss. You notice the barn smells less. No manure, no old hay. Just cold wood and cold air, and the faint echo of something breathing beneath boards. You sleep in nightmares of eyes in dark fields. You wake with hands clawed, blanket torn. You check the animals. They're still there. Maybe that helps. Maybe not. But still, the beasts endure, and their strange behaviors remind you you're not alone. That in a world gone wrong, life still clings awkwardly, malformed, but present. It's not what it once was. But sometimes, shape is enough. You hear about Constantinople first, not from letters or traders, those have stopped, but through whispers that drift across the wind. They say the city is drowning in bodies, 10,000 dying per day, according to the grim counts. Gravediggers can't keep pace. Mass pits swallow corpses. They're buried in towers full of lime. Others are launched on boats, set aflame in the Sea of Marmara just to clear the streets. You recall the merchant who spoke of that city, eyes hollow, beard unkempt, wrapped in too many cloaks. He told of silence where mosques once rang, famine where courts once held feast. And now you understand those words weren't exaggeration. They were prophecy. The plague began at Port Clysma in Egypt around 541 CE, carried on cargo ships from grain stores weaving its way into Pelusium, and then Constantinople by spring 542. Once there, it torched the population like wildfire. It spread outward, east into Palestine and Egypt, west into Anatolia, Italy, Gaul, even reaching Britain and Ireland within only a few years. Once it arrives in a city, civilization crumbles. Markets close. Coins lose value. Temples open as granaries close. Laws forget how to enforce themselves. Cities decay. Trash piles grow. Streets fall silent. Archaeologists today confirm that even cities like Alusa lost organized waste systems, a sign of collapse, long before invading armies arrived. Even the emperor suffered. Justinian himself fell sick, then recovered, or later died, or maybe never fully healed. The myth says he paid for burials. When mass graves overflowed, bodies were stuffed into towers. Ships loaded corpses and burned at sea. When death reached its peak, Constantinople was nearly half gone. Some estimates suggest up to 50% of its population died. And yet, the empire did not disappear overnight. Some historians argue the plague simply reordered power, paused empires, but didn't topple them entirely. Recent genetic studies confirm the bubonic plague pathogen Yersinia pestis in ancient remains from Germany to the UK, suggesting the pandemic's reach was broader and faster than texts claimed. Back home, the plague arrives, later often whispered, at first, then announced when someone coughs unexpectedly and never wakes again. Your village, remote and small, doesn't escape. It comes in stages, not cities shut down. Water tastes strange, fewer bird songs. Then the first scratchy cough, faint at first, each cough, a punctuation mark on your nerves. The priest begins burying bodies behind the chapel, no ceremony. The mystic ties bits of garlic to doorways. A child draws a circle in the dirt and refuses to leave. The plague tears through trusted faces, the blacksmith's wife, the scribe, the miller's apprentice, and then your neighbor's daughter. You cannot stop it. You can't quarantine ghosts or hail crosses from heaven. People stop naming the dead. They tally marks on a door. They carve stones. They whisper names only after dark when it's safe. You lose count. Some scholars today say perhaps only a fifth of the population died. Others estimate upward of 30% across Europe and the Near East. It shattered cities, dislocated armies, triggered migrations, reshaped economies, and set the stage for waves of barbarian movements into Roman territory, all while the sky stayed pale. In cities, trade collapsed. In villages, the well runs dry. The notion of the future fades. You ask lesser questions. Will the child wake? Will the ashes blow away? That's your calculus. Eventually the plague eases. It doesn't go away. Just recedes. The tally wall goes blank for days, then weeks. You breathe again. Terribly, but you breathe. The priest mumbles prayers like survivors tally credits. The mystic returns from the woods, haunted hollow. Life resumes in a broken rhythm. You rebuild, not with bricks, but with routines. You sweep ash. You tend root crops. You tell children about birds. You keep a button jar, small tokens of memory not trade. Meanwhile, historians debate, was this a fate of empires event or just another catastrophic flu? Some say the empire weathered it for another 80 years before new enemies eroded its reach. Others argue the plague was a decisive pivot in world history, ending antiquity and ushering in the Middle Ages. In your bones, you know it changed everything. Not because swords entered cities, but because silence conquered them. Because hunger outlasted armies. Because memory outlives sunlight. In the ditch behind the woods, a stranger eventually buries himself. No name, no ceremony. You leave a rock as always. Then you plant pumpkin seeds beside it. Hope is stubborn, and so are you. Worship used to be about sunlight. Temples climbed toward the sky. Statues wore golden crowns. Incense drifted upward in thank you smoke. Priests measured days by the sun's arc. You prayed at dawn. You bowed at daylight. You sang at dusk. Now the sky is blank. Worship feels hollow. Sun gods are out of business. You used to call her Solana. The woman down the lane runs a little shrine, a pillar topped with a round stone painted yellow. She'd bless the harvest, chant morning hymns, light a small fire. You'd drop a painted shell or a handful of pumpkin seeds. In return, you felt someone above cared. Now no one visits. Her shrine is blank. No shells, no seeds, no fire. Just dust moss and a gray stone staring up at nothing. With no sun, the gods lost their purpose. Temples that once rang with prayers for rain now stand silent. Priests whisper less. Statues are dusty and cracked. The gods feel like old patrons who fled town when business died. You ask the priest one day if the gods are angry. He shrugs, looking out at the sky, as though trying to remember its color. Maybe they just retired, he says softly. No one laughs. A few villagers decide to repurpose a god or invent a new one. They tie sun symbols to trees. They let children march around with flags painted yellowish. They chant, "Light shall return." It feels important, even if untrue. The mystic draws runes in ash circles. They look like suns, but small, diminished. She says it means hope survives. You squint at them in dawn-like gloom and feel proud. Sun gods were supposed to shine, but maybe it's enough that their symbols remain. Meanwhile, Sunday services feel odd. You gather in the chapel. The priest still speaks of light, but it sounds like proverb now, not prophecy. He blesses the fields, but they're dead. He prays for warmth, but fire consumes too much wood. Still you line up and cross yourself, because faith is habit, and survival is habit, and habits are what's left. Some begin to question. One old man named Martin says, "Why worship a God who doesn't show up?" Another replies, "Because it's not about the God showing up. It's about you showing up to belief." That line echoes. You pray, you stay. You hold the ashes in cups shaped like sun symbols. Even animals seem confused by this religious pause. Chickens stop wandering near shrines. Dogs avoid offering stones. Cats hide ribbons tied to branches. You fill in. You tie wreaths around the shrine. Leave bits of squash. Scatter sunflowers. Even if dried. Even if dusty. Other gods gain attention. The forest guardian, the river spirit, an unnamed whisper in the wind you pray to them. The mystic says those spirits moved in when daylight left. You don't argue. You whisper thank you to water and earth and ash after meals. Religious structure, phrase. The local bishoptron is supposed to keep doctrine tight, but he coughs a lot. He forgets funeral rites. He starts giving sermons from memory, paginated, memorized, dull. Some say he should retire, but who would take over? So congregations just sort of disperse, drifting to shrines, to rituals by the river, to chants in huts. The priest visits us now, not every week, but whenever he can cross the field. He carries a candled bowl and talks about resurrection. You stare at the candle's flame, small, dirty, woefully inadequate. You once asked someone if they still believe in the afterlife. They said, "I don't know what life is anymore, but I believe in rest." It sounded true. Religious artifacts become tools. A bell rung at dawn becomes alarm. A chalice used for wine now holds water. A holy book's burned pages wrap turnip roots for storage. You treat it all with reverence anyway. Somewhere in the dusk of belief, you meet the idea that maybe the divine is quieter now. Maybe gods take sabbaticals. Maybe the sun god isn't gone, just napping. Maybe light comes from somewhere unexpected. So you wait. You pray. You leave offerings. You tend faint symbols of worship. You keep faith alive through actions, not brightness. And in this way, sprigs of hope sprout. From small rituals. From prayer, not to gods, but to memory. From bowls lit by candles, too sad to burn yet burning. Because even a god who stops shining can't kill the desire for warmth. And maybe that's more important now than ever. Once art was sunshine. Church murals glowed with saints in golden halos. Manuscripts were edged in blue, red, green colors borrowed from the world. Sculptors chiseled faces of gods and emperors. Even common homes had painted jugs or woven tapestries. Beauty was sunlight, captured in pigment and stone. Now art looks different. It's dark, not in tone literally. Color pigments are gone. Blue lapis lazuli is extinct. Red cochineal vanished. Gold leaf turned to ash. Artists scavenge cracked chalk to sketch on plaster walls, breathing dust with every stroke. Their tools are twigs, soot a dab of blood for ink. Art becomes necessity, not decoration. You saw a child draw a face in ash. No mouth, no eyes, just a circle. Above it, a broken sun. The mystic said, "It's honest art." Art survives because memory survives. In the chapel, someone repainted the crucifix. Not with colors, just outlines. Blown by ash, simplified, skeletal. No glory, just truth. The priest paused, touched it, then turned. He left without words. Many murals are erased by cold. Moisture from frost peels plaster from walls. You kneel before one that used to depict angels. Now it's a gray smear. You trace halos with your fingertip. They crumble. Some scribes keep writing. In secret, they copy verses in margins of bark. They write names of people who died when no one else would. They draw animals that no one sees anymore, nail a small fowl next to their names. It feels wrong, reverent, necessary. There's talk of a hidden map. No one has it. Someone says it points to a place where sunlight still warms walls. Others argue it's myth. Still they look. Art becomes participation. The people who once sat silent now add chalk marks around rune stones. They swirl lines in the dust as they walk. They weave grasses into patterns that waver in wind, disappearing before anyone can trace them. You shape a leaf when no one watches. Carve symbols into pumpkins. Paint the ashes on your own hand and call it display. It isn't grand. It's small. It's fleeting. It's human. One day, you see an owl. Vanish suddenly into the ash clouds. Feathers pale, face blank. It looks at you. You feel seen. You draw it on bark with charcoal. Next day, it's gone. The sketch remains. An old woman knits, not cloth, not scarves, for that takes cotton you don't have. She knits air. She looped a single thread of moss around her fingers for days, then let it vanish. She says it's the last color she can afford. You applaud. That's art. Somewhere after the eclipse, someone painted over a wet wall. A black streak ash smudge turned vertical. They called it the absent sun. They left it. They let it fade. It's more powerful than a mural. You stop expecting art to endure. You keep making it anyway. Because silence needs punctuation. Loss needs shape. Hope needs a signature. Someone dares to write a song. At the edge of the field, someone struck a lyre. Strings, thin wood cracked. They sang a melody of sun and rain in one breath, a mournful line followed by a joyous refrain. No one knows the lyrics next day, but they cry when they remember how it felt, not how it sounded. Art becomes music you don't hear. You smell paint. It smells like empty rooms. The blacksmith carves runes into spoons. The mystic draws sun symbols on stones and hangs them upside down. A child draws a maze in dust and forgets as soon as they leave. They call it the memory garden. You walk through it. You add a bit of ash, a swirl, a footprint, a vow. Art has changed shape, from fresco to footprint, from manuscript to memory shard, from temple to pumpkin carving, from choir to solitary hum. And still it matters. Because sometimes the world needs something broken, something dark to feel human again. You paint one symbol yourself, a tiny circle with lines. You call it morgue flower in your diary. It means bloom of absence, and in a world without color, you still planted it. It happens slowly, not with fanfare, not with brightness. But one morning, you're sure it's a morning because you sense a shift you wake, and the air tastes different. Less metallic, less memory. You step outside. The frost breaks beneath your boots. Not frozen ground, just wet, soft. Sometimes the cold retreats like a tide at dawn. The next day more follows. Tiny shoots emerge. Green, real green. A blade of grass curls from cracked soil like it remembered how to live. The seeds you planted, those fragile hopes, you poke them. Some are gone. Others push through. You press a fingertip into the earth. It's damp, not frozen. Normal soil again. People notice. It starts with one woman who thought her turnip sprouted. Then another who saw a bird, real full-color bird with yellow feathers. Someone names it promise and lets it perch on their finger. You hear laughter again. Not from kids playing plague games. Not from bitter jokes about sun lost or beans traded. Real laughter. Real. A chorus at the well. A woman exclaims she felt warmth on her cheek. Not from fire, from actual sun. You actually walk toward the sky and feel sunlight. Not the moon-silenced, cratered sunlight of earlier years, but something softer, gentler. Like someone finally flipped the switch. Your shoulders relax. You catch your breath. Then you see blossoms. Daffodils, wild onions, unbidden bulbs bursting out. You pick some. You bring them to the chapel door. You lay them at the stone threshold like an apology, a thank you gift. People follow the green. Neighborhoods become mossy parks. Ruined huts spark vines. Inside tables sprout mushrooms. It feels wrong but wonderful. The shriveled root cellars stink not of death, but of decomposed life. You mow it down, let it rot, keep some for compost instead of fire. Harvest talk returns. Pumpkin seeds get planted again, but this time in hopeful soil, not desperate dirt. The village plans for actual grain in spring. Talks of seed swaps, barter routes reopening, maybe even repairs to the road to the next town. Silk is still gone. Spice is still myth. But trade dreams return. Even dried figs are spoken of as if reachable. Children run barefoot. You once considered butter a hospital recipe. Now you teach them how to milk goats again carefully, without fridges, but with care. They laugh when the goat kicks like goats used to. Religious rituals shift again. Priests bless fields under actual sunlight. Sun symbols return to shrines. Someone ignites a ceremonial torch at dawn and walks the sun pillar around the village. They chant, "Return the day. Let light live." It sounds absurd. It feels transcendent. Art blooms too. Your chapel cross sketch is repainted with chalk and pigment from wild berries. The mural's overhaul is clumsy but human. Scribes write again, not just names, but stories. One writes, "We remember light because it left." Music plays softly at dusk. A lyre with 6 strings of flute, a drum made from goat hide. You gather and sing old songs you've forgotten the words to but remember the hope in the tune. Time feels real again. You check your carved calendar lines. The tally wall goes silent. No more dark days, just blank days waiting to be named. You replace them with green lines. New seasons. You rewrite the bark diary, overlaying old marks with fresh vows, plant barley. Teach the children to draw again. Build a hive by spring. Pets return to normal. The goats jump. Dogs chase leaves. Cats bat in sunbeams. You almost cry the first time you see the barn cat stretch and yawn in warm light. You're cautious. You remember how the sky vanished before. You've drawn suns and crossed them out too many times. So you smile gently, but you don't shout. You plant more seeds, but keep ashes in jars just in case. Still, you feel something crumble inside grief, fear, fatigue. A part of you resisted hope because it was dangerous. Now, resistance gives way. You forgive for forgetting laughter, for failing to look for sun, for trading away stories for survival. Nature forgives too. You kneel in the field. You bring compost. You whisper promises to remember, to care, to honor what almost lost you. The earth is damp and welcoming. Someone makes bread again, not morning loaf. Flatterino, a word they invent for flat but forgiving. It's dough mixed with pumpkin and barley, nothing fancy but boiled long and made to puff over the fire. It smells like autumn. People bite through crust and sigh. Sunset returns too. It's small at first, a flicker across the ash cloud rim. Daylight yawns, opens its arms. You stand and watch until the sky closes again, heavy with clouds, but you know it'll open again. You walk toward home. The mist feels warm on your face. You imagine sleeping under blankets without frost in your breath. And maybe tomorrow the sun will be brighter. Rebuilding wasn't loud. It didn't involve banners, ceremonies, or crowning heroes. It began with small acts, quiet miracles. A plank replaced here, a window unboarded there, a hut repaired with wood from fallen beams, and mud mixed with ashes. You take the first shovel of composted soil, broken seeds, turned earth, decayed turnip skins, and spread it over a long furrow. When you come back the next day, tiny green shoots push upward. You call them promise sprouts. No fanfare, just a whispered thank you. Neighbors join. One brings seeds from pumpkins that survived. Another donates cracked pots for seedlings. The blacksmith hammers crooked nails into a trellis. Together you form a ragtag replanting brigade. You plant beans, barley squash, and odd herbs, plants that taught you how to eat again. Children attend replanting day like a festival. They wear wreaths of dried pumpkins and ash-forged sun symbols. They sing misremembered songs about dawn and rain. Their laughter echoes across tilled fields, not from joy exactly, but from release. Repair work begins. Roofs patched, windows, unboarded wells swept. The chapel's collapsed roof gets removed brick by brick. No reconstruction, just cleansing. The mystic plants sunflowers in front. You paint a small sun above the door. Not bright, not perfect, barely noticeable in gray mortar. But someone sees it and smiles. Efforts continue indoors. You gather old fabrics, patch them to make a quilt. Each family contributes a scrap. When you sew them together, the quilt is thin and faded, but rich with stories. You hang it over the old chapel bench. Now it serves as altar cloth and memory tapestry. Trading resumes. Not sugar or spices yet. People barter seeds. Tools repaired, boots. Dreams. Someone invents a seed swap market, held weekly under a tree outside the ruined warehouse. The button left by the stranger, buried under dirt, originally finds new life, sewn into a pouch used to store barley. You hear talk of reopening roads, plans drawn on bark scraps, maps of distances, trails, destination dots with sun icons beside them. You walk toward the next village, one morning in a small group. You carry tools, seeds, water. You focus on steps across grass, not ash. You feel hope in your boots. The journey is cautious. No encounters. But you sense the world outside, still dormant, still hollow. One traveler nods at your sewn flag, planted at your barn gate, a yellow fabric scrap fluttering. He says softly, "Maybe there's still daylight." You say, "We keep planting." Repairs extend beyond wood. You teach children to read again. Not Latin, but bark runic letters, simple symbols for sunseed sorrow faith. They weave them into small storybooks of bark pages. You draw symbols for pumpkins, birds, cats. You bind it with vine. It's fragile. You guard it. Art returns. The young carve faces into gourds, simmer vegetable dyes for paint. They decorate jars. They draw runes along fences. You paint the barn door with a stylized rising sun. It's naive. It's uneven. It's art. Music returns too. The lyre player builds a 6-string instrument from reclaimed wood and thin tendons. He tunes it imperfectly. But when he plays, the vibrations seem to warm your chest. Someone drums on an old tub lid. Someone whistles a tune they half remember. You hush for minutes to hear silence again. Faith rebuilds. Prayer happens at dawn under bare sky patches. Symbolic charters promises to keep light sacred again. The plague-dead scarred tile behind the chapel is covered with a sun talisman. Not because you believe the sun god returned, but because you won't pretend the darkness crushed you. Weddings resume. One couple marries under a tree. They tie ribbons of mustard plant fibers. They promise small vows to cook together, to share seeds, to remember the silent years without naming them. Neighbors bring drop cakes, tiny flat, barley pumpkin waffles, not festive, but insistent. Life insisting, you still wake expecting cold ash. But mornings shift, mist rises. Frost remains only in shadows. Birds call real songs, now not memory echoes. You're still careful. You still keep ashes in jars, a relic of caution. But their weight feels different now, polishable, manageable. Hope becomes habit again. Not false, not blind. Real but cautious, a small fire reborn around which fragile light gathers. You plant a tree. A young sapling delivered from the next village, a willow. You stake it in soil, turned soft. You water it daily. You tie cloth strips around its trunk, little suns and seeds for luck. It quivers but stands. You promise to keep it alive. Because the quiet act of growth matters more now than any sermon or prophecy. You walk between repaired huts and tilled rows and say to yourself, "We built this from ashes." It's not enough to celebrate. It's humble thanks. Your diary returns to bark pages, but now you write differently. Entries like Day 250, planted beans. Missed someone's name. Day 255, first sunset, I noticed. Day 260, owl called at dusk. You sketch pumpkins, letters suns. The tallies end. The tally of absence ends. You breathe more easily. You forgive. If sun was late or absent, if gods napped, if memories burned, if trade failed, you stand in green rows. You smile at sprouts. You watch sunlight shift across the chapel stone and feel something stir the slow pulse of a world you helped begin again. Now, you stand in sunlight again, sort of. Not blinding, not golden, but gentle, soft, like the world is exhaling. The ash is fading in layers, revealing stone dust grass. You step outside and feel damp earth, not frozen ash. It takes a moment to believe. You look back on the tally wall inside your home. 180 days of darkness, 180 lines, 9 months of absence. Each smudge a silent footstep of despair. You run your finger along the final mark. Then you erase it. Or maybe you just trace it. Either way, the rhythm breaks. The days blur again, but this time toward light. You eat breakfast outside. Barley porridge with honey, real honey, from combs traded with another village. The taste is fragile, sweet. You close your eyes and let it settle. You taste sunlight. You walk through the field you helped replant. Beans coil around trellis. Pumpkins swell heavy. Wildflowers dot the grass. Birds nest again. You feel dizzy for joy. You meet your neighbors under the old oak. They joke about summer gloves and frostbite midwinter. The jokes are poor but hearty. You laugh. Laugh at yourself. Laugh at the memories that once broke your heart. You ask, who remembers the merchant who wore cloaks and traded memories? They point toward a stone near the tree. A marker you placed. It still holds his button. You kneel and trace it. Speak his name to air. Promise not to forget. You return to the chapel. The new roof is patched. A sun symbol hangs above the door. You sweep old ashes. You pour fresh incense made from mint and sage. The priest leads a song. The melody is new, or maybe forgotten, but everyone hums along. Some eyes missed. Someone smiles at you like you brought dawn. You open your bark book. Pages filled with names, regrets, hopes, symbols of suns, pumpkins, boats you're planning to build. You add a new entry, Day 280 light stays. You seal it with a dab of wax and a scratch your personal rune for memory. You walk the newly cleared road toward the next village. Along the way, kids pluck berries, pick sunflowers, pull sugar beet sprigs. They hand you a trail of color. They've named it the Road of Smiles. It feels revolutionary. At the halfway point, you pause. You look behind. Ash gray fields turned green. Lean barns growing vines. Distant hills cloaked in moss. You breathe deep and whisper, "We did this. We survived. We remember." Because those tiny acts planting seeds, drawing suns, carving pumpkins, didn't just feed the body. They fed the soul. They held the line between memory and oblivion, between silence and song. The darkness tried to break people. It nearly did. But you rebuilt, quietly, steadily, with hands that once held ashes, now planting life. You look forward. You see children running barefoot, birds building nests, rain falling soft, not smothering. And the sky, still pale, still fragile, leans toward blue. Not because the sun returned in fury, but because people kept waiting. You remember not as an end, but as a beginning. Because even after the longest night dawn comes, and when it arrives, slow, muted, mysterious, you carry torch, then you lay it down. Because now you can walk into the light with open hands. Now The harvest air is gentle on your skin. The cold has softened into morning hush. Though the land still bears scars, thin grass ash seams in furrows, the world around you breathes slowly renewed. You still carry jars of ash by habit tucked beneath floorboards, like prayers saved for darker days. But each day, you touch their lids less. Inside your home, the quilt on the bench glows softly in morning light. Children laugh over seed catalogs written on bark. The chapel door opens with sunlight spilling through. Songs begin again, imperfect, shaky, but persistent. They rise with warmth, not mourning. You walk among beans, pumpkins, wildflowers, and think of all who survived. The merchant who traded memories, the baker who burned the first morning loaf, the child who drew suns in dust, the mystic who planted hope beneath tree roots. Each became living testament that when the sky disappeared, people didn't. They remembered. Now, as you kneel beside the willow, you whisper vows to tend the earth with gratitude, to teach stories of darkness and light, to never forget how silence felt. The wind brushes branches. Leaves stir. In their rustle, you hear names you once etched in stone. The world is delicate again. Life rebuilds in slow increments. Green shoots, broken hymns, crooked art, muddy bread, cautious laughter. You carry the past in journals and memory, not bitterness. In the future, you walk it with care. Because hope isn't a fire that flares and dies. It's a slow ember, glowing under ashes, waiting for air. Now you walk toward home hands, stained with soil, and soot reminders that light returns, that dawn survives, and that even after 18 months in darkness, life and stories can rise from dust